There are moments in life that don't come with thunder or sirens, just silence deafening and final. The moment I became a burden in my daughter's eyes didn't come with an argument. It came through a phone she forgot to hang up. And in that quiet betrayal, something in me, something old, loving, and proud quietly broke. My name is Frank Morgan. I'm a retired construction engineer, a widower, and, until very recently, a father who believed he had raised a daughter with a good heart. I live alone in a house on the outskirts of Victoria, British Columbia, a house I built with my own two hands in 1999. Every nail, every board, every inch of insulation, I laid it down with Margaret by my side, lemonade in her hands, baby Lauren in her belly. We poured our dreams into the walls of that house. For 25 years, it wasn't just a home, it was a love story, set in wood and stone. After Margaret passed from cancer, silence took up residence. I learned to live with the quiet. I kept the house tidy, tended the garden she once adored, made tea in the mornings just for the scent of it. Even though I rarely drank more than a few sips, my days became soft and predictable. Until that night, Lauren called, as she usually did once or twice a week. Her voice was warm, caring, familiar in a way that made my chest ache. "Hi, Dad," she said. "Just wanted to check in. Did you eat dinner? You know you can order groceries. Now I showed you the app. Remember?" I told her I was fine, that I'd had leftovers, that I might watch some news after our call. I didn't mention I'd spent the last hour staring at the photo of Margaret on the mantel, or that the house had felt heavier lately, like it was grieving too. "Ethan and I are wrapping up the trip tomorrow," she added. "I'll call you again once we land." "I love you, sweetheart," I said, and I meant it, with every cracked, tired fiber of my being. "I love you too, Dad." Then came the sound of her purse zipper, a shuffle, a click, but not the one that ends a call. I reached to hang up, but paused as I heard voices muffled, but clear enough. Lauren and Ethan, talking, planning. "He left the stove on again yesterday," she said. "What if the whole place had caught fire? He can't keep living alone," Ethan added flatly. "It's time for assisted living. We can't keep dancing around this." "He won't fight it," Lauren said. "He trusts us. And that house? It could sell for close to $1 million in this market." They spoke with certainty, with calculation, with the ease of two people making decisions about an asset, not a person. I didn't drop the phone right away. I didn't even breathe. My ears rang with each word, not because they were loud, but because they were true. True to them, not to me. When the phone finally slipped from my hand and hit the hardwood, it felt like the final nail in something I couldn't name. I sat there, surrounded by the house I had built with love, by memories of birthdays, scraped knees, bedtime stories, and all I could feel was hollow. Margaret's photo watched me from the mantel. Her smile, once comforting, now seemed distant, like she already knew this would happen, like she'd tried to warn me. And in that moment, I realized something I had never allowed myself to think. Maybe love, even when given in full, doesn't always come back to you. Sometimes it just fades quietly, like the end of a call that never should have continued. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the same chair, long after the phone had fallen silent, the room dark except for the soft amber glow of the hallway light reflecting off Margaret's picture frame. My thoughts wandered back, not to the betrayal I had just overheard, but to everything that came before it, as if my mind was searching for proof that the love we gave hadn't been wasted. I remembered the year we bought the land, 1998. Margaret was radiant, her belly round with Lauren. We were young, full of ambition, and terribly short on money. But we had dreams, and for us, that was enough. I'd work overtime during the week, then spend weekends digging trenches, pouring concrete, measuring frames under a summer sun that burned through our shirts. Margaret brought us sandwiches and cold lemonade. She always smiled, even when the dust clung to her eyelashes. We didn't hire contractors, couldn't afford them. So I learned how to do it all: electrical, drywall, roofing. Sometimes my hands would bleed through the gloves, but I didn't care. We were building our life, beam by beam, room by room. It took us over a year. The day we moved in, Lauren was just starting to crawl. Margaret cried, when we crossed the threshold with her in our arms. That house wasn't just wood and nails. It was our hope, our sacrifice, and our story. Lauren's room was the first we finished. Soft yellow walls with white trim, a handmade crib I built in the garage. Nights spent rocking her through colic while Margaret rubbed my back. Every corner of that home held a memory. The hallway where Lauren took her first steps. The kitchen where Margaret taught her how to make shortbread cookies. The front yard where I built her a swing from leftover pine beams. We didn't have much money, but Lauren never knew. I took on extra jobs to cover her dance classes, school trips, braces. Margaret picked up substitute teaching gigs. Even when her chemo made her tired, we saved for years to help Lauren attend university. I still remember the tuition bills, $48,000 over 4 years. I worked double shifts, crawling home past midnight, and Margaret would be waiting with coffee and a quiet smile. She'd sit beside me as I paid bills at the kitchen table we'd built together. She deserves more than we had. I'd tell her she's got the brains for anything. Margaret would nod and kiss my temple. Just don't give her so much that she forgets to be grateful. I should have listened more closely to that. When Lauren graduated, I was the proudest man in the world. She danced with me at her wedding. Her arms wrapped around me like she was still 5 years old. She whispered, "Daddy, I'll never forget what you've done for me." And I believed her. God help me. I believed every word. I co-signed her first car loan, helped her and Ethan with their down payment. When Ethan lost his job, they moved in temporarily while he looked for something new. I never asked for rent. I covered groceries, paid utilities, even fixed their car once for $3,000. They were family. That's what you do for family, isn't it? Back then, I thought I was helping them build their life, but now, as I stared into the stillness of my living room, I saw the truth I had refused to acknowledge. Somewhere along the way, I'd stopped being a father and become an asset. They hadn't just forgotten my sacrifices. They'd reduced them to numbers on a property listing. I looked down at my hands, the same hands that built this home, wiped Lauren's tears, held Margaret through her final breaths. They trembled now not with age, but with the weight of everything I had carried and everything I had just lost. I had given them everything, but I would not give them this house. Not like this. The house felt different the next morning. Not because anything had changed on the surface. The curtains still caught the early light in that golden hue Margaret used to love. The grandfather clock still ticked in its measured rhythm. My tea brewed the same way it always had, but something in the air had shifted. Or maybe it was something in me. I moved through the house like I was walking through a place I used to love. Now haunted by voices. Her voice, Lauren's, a burden. She called me a burden. Not directly, of course, but close enough, cold enough, careless enough for the word to stick to my skin like ash. The same mouth that once called me the best dad in the world now spoke of assisted living and asset value and acting, while he still trusts us. And she did. She knew I trusted her. That was the part that gutted me the most. She counted on it. I stood in the hallway outside her old bedroom, yellow walls, the white bookshelf I built for her 16th birthday, still filled with yearbooks and photos she'd never come back for. I looked at the space and tried to find the daughter I remembered. The girl with scraped knees and crooked ponytails who used to climb into my lap while I read bedtime stories. The girl who once cried when I missed her school play because I was stuck on a construction site pouring concrete in the rain. That girl was gone. And the woman who had replaced her, she hadn't just forgotten. She had calculated. As I walked into the kitchen, I thought about the countless little kindnesses that had become invisible over the years. Groceries quietly covered when Ethan lost his job. Power bills paid without being asked. Repairs handled before they even noticed anything was broken. When Lauren said, "Dad, we'll pay you back," I believed her. When Ethan called me the most generous man in British Columbia, I smiled like a fool. There was no malice in their tone. That was the most terrifying part. It was casual, efficient, as if this had been discussed for weeks, as if I was the last one to know I'd been cut from the cast of their lives. I turned and looked at the kitchen counter Margaret had chosen, speckled gray with golden veining. I installed it myself, measured 3 times to get it right. She said it reminded her of the ocean on a sunny day. Every time I made coffee there, I thought of her standing in a housecoat, humming quietly. That countertop wasn't just granite. It was a piece of her, of us. Now it felt tainted, like the warmth had drained from it. I walked through the house slowly, and every corner turned into a confrontation. The swing in the backyard, where Lauren learned to pump her legs and soar on her own, now it felt like a monument to someone else's child. The fireplace where we'd opened gifts on Christmas morning, now just a relic of a family I thought I still belonged to. By the time I reached the living room, I could barely breathe. This wasn't a home anymore. It was a ledger, a line item, a potential listing on a real estate website. Ethan had even said it aloud. That house could sell for close to $1 million. Not my home? That house? That's when I knew. I hadn't just overheard a betrayal. I had woken up inside it. And this house, the house I built with love, with scraped knuckles and second mortgages and quiet joy, was no longer safe. It was no longer mine. Even if the deed said otherwise, it was a weapon, and I wasn't going to let them use it against me. Once I stopped seeing the house as my sanctuary, it became something else, something strategic. A line had been crossed, and though my heart ached, my hands were steady. The next morning, I pulled out a business card from the back of my desk drawer. Todd Fisher, real estate attorney. Margaret had made me meet with him a few years before she passed. Just in case, she'd said. Back then, I thought it was unnecessary. Now, I realized she had known something I didn't grieve as unpredictable. But betrayal can be prepared for. I called Todd's office. His assistant remembered me, Mr. Morgan, from the house on Deerfield Lane. That's right, I said, I need a consultation. Discreetly, he saw me the same day. Todd hadn't aged much since we last met. Mid-50s, graying at the temples, with the calm eyes of someone who has heard every kind of family disaster. I explained what had happened, every detail from the overheard call to the tone in Lauren's voice. He didn't flinch. When I mentioned their talk of selling the house, he leaned forward. Is the title in your name only? He asked. Yes. Margaret and I held it jointly, but when she passed, it transferred entirely to me. Then let me be very clear, Mr. Morgan. Your daughter and her husband have absolutely no legal claim. They cannot sell it. They cannot force you to do anything. The relief that swept over me was not joy. It was permission. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't theirs to manage. Let's say I wanted to sell it myself, I said quietly. How fast could that happen? Very fast, he said. Especially in this market, we'd want a clean, cash-ready buyer. I can help with the legal end. But you'll need a realtor, I nodded. And later that afternoon, I searched online. I compared testimonials, reviews, credentials. Just like I used to review suppliers back when I managed crews and materials for bridges and buildings. I didn't want flashy, I wanted reliable. One name kept coming up. Brian Connor. Mid-40s, professional, responsive, excellent with private sales. I dialed his number and got a cheerful voice. Brian Connor speaking. How can I help you? Mr. Connor, I said. My name is Frank Morgan. I'm interested in selling my home quietly and quickly. He asked me some preliminary questions. Location, size, condition. When I mentioned I was the original owner and had done all the maintenance myself, his tone sharpened. That's exactly what buyers are looking for, he said. Homes with care and history. Do you mind if I stop by tomorrow to assess it? Tomorrow's perfect. I spent that evening walking through the house with new eyes. Not as a man about to lose something, but as a man about to reclaim something. I tidied, dusted, polished the brass fixtures Margaret had picked. I didn't do it for the sale, I did it for her. She deserved a proper farewell. The house deserved to go out with dignity. Brian arrived on time, neatly dressed, professional, confident, without being arrogant. He walked through each room like he was studying a piece of craftsmanship. You weren't kidding, he said, running his hand along the oak banister. This place is in immaculate condition. I built it for someone I loved, I replied simply. He didn't ask questions about my family, and I was grateful. He focused on the value, the logistics, the timing. When he finally sat at my kitchen table with his tablet, he said, "Given the market and condition, I'd suggest listing at 970. I already know investors who'd make a cash offer within days. Let's do it," I said. That night, I sat at the table Margaret and I once gathered around with our daughter, now cluttered with contracts and signatures. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt certain they had taken me for a burden. But I was still a builder, and now I was building something else my own way out. The house had been appraised, the paperwork initiated, and the plan was in motion. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like cleaning up after a storm, methodical, necessary, and quietly painful. I started in the hallway closet, where Margaret kept our winter coats. Hers still hung there, lavender wool with the buttons she loved. I ran my hand down the sleeve, then folded it carefully into a box I labeled Keep. Not for the next place, but for memory. I wasn't ready to let go of her scent, faint as it was some mix of peppermint, tea tree oil, and old books. Each room became a ritual. Not rushed, not emotional, either, just quiet. I sorted through family albums, Margaret's recipe box, Lauren's old trophies and report cards. There were pictures. I kept one of Margaret in the garden, sun on her face, dirt on her gloves. One of Lauren at age 7, asleep on my chest during a thunderstorm. There were others I packed away without looking. When I came across the handmade birthday card Margaret gave me in 2003, crayon hearts and stick figures drawn with Lauren's help, I paused longer than I expected. I sat on the edge of the bed and let the silence settle around me. There were no tears this time, just a weight in my chest I didn't try to lift. Packing wasn't just about moving. It was about releasing. By the end of the second day, I had 10 boxes neatly taped and labeled. Photos, clothes, kitchen essentials, personal items, everything else I left behind. The furniture would be part of the sale, and I didn't want to carry ghosts into my next place. Sunset Grove wasn't luxurious, but it was dignified. A quiet seniors community tucked behind a grove of maples near the edge of town. Not institutional, more like a modest condominium complex where people minded their own business and appreciated silence. The building had an elevator, a small library, and a shaded walking path that curved past a community garden. The unit I chose was on the 3rd floor, 1 bedroom, open kitchen, lots of natural light. Margaret would have liked the view west-facing, catching the last warmth of every sunset. Moving day came faster than I expected. I hired a discreet service, 2 polite young men in matching polo shirts who didn't ask questions. They handled the boxes with care, nodded when I gave instructions, and wished me well as I handed them their check. Once everything was in place at Sunset Grove, I went back to Deerfield Lane one last time. I walked from room to room, not to double-check anything, but to say goodbye. In the kitchen, I touched the edge of the counter one last time. In the living room, I straightened a curtain. At the top of the stairs, I paused and took a breath. Then I walked to the front door, where a small toolkit sat waiting. I changed the locks, both the front and back doors, not because I was afraid, but because it was mine to do. Next, I set up a discreet security camera tucked behind the ivy near the porch. It connected to my phone. I tested it twice, adjusted the angle, then stepped back and nodded. That was the builder in me. I didn't like loose ends. Finally, I took a thick envelope from my jacket pocket. Inside was a letter, written in my own hand, not out of anger, but out of necessity. I placed it gently on the hallway table, propped up with a polished stone Lauren once gave me on a trip to Tofino. I don't know if she remembers it, but I did. The letter read, "Lauren, if you're reading this, then I'm gone by my own choice, and not under pressure. You may be angry. That's fair. But you should know that trust, once broken, cannot be repainted like a wall. It stains deeper than that. You saw this house as something to inherit. I saw it as a memory of love, of work, of your mother, of you. I wish you well, but I will not be used. I still have dignity, and I choose to protect it. Dad?" I stood in the doorway, took one last look, then closed the door behind me, not with sadness, but with resolve. The house I had built was no longer mine, Not emotionally, not spiritually, but the life I was about to build, that was mine again. 3 days later, Lauren and Ethan pulled into the driveway on Deerfield Lane in a sleek rental SUV, their vacation tans still fresh, sunglasses perched on their heads. Expressions relaxed until they reached the front door. The key didn't work. Lauren jammed the key into the lock for the third time, twisting hard. Nothing. She stepped back, breathing heavily, brows furrowed in confusion. He changed the locks, she muttered. Ethan tried his key, more forcefully. Still nothing. What the hell is this? They exchanged a look, half confusion, half unease. The door, which had always opened with ease, now stood as a barrier, one they hadn't expected. Lauren spotted the envelope on the entry table. Through the glass, her name, bold and unmistakable, propped by a smooth stone. Her stomach dropped. They rushed to the side door, still unlocked. Inside, the house was eerily pristine, cold, empty. Too clean? Lauren snatched the letter. Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened it. She began to read, lips moving, eyes scanning quickly. With each line, her face drained of color, then flushed with red. Ethan leaned in. Well? She didn't answer. What's it say? He repeated, voice sharper. She shoved the letter at him, as if it burned her fingers. Read it. He took it, eyes narrowing. As he read, his nostrils flared. You may be angry. That's fair. But you should know that trust, once broken, cannot be repainted like a wall. I will not be used. I still have dignity, and I choose to protect it. Ethan crumpled the letter in his fist. Unbelievable. He spat. He's seriously playing the victim now. He heard us, Lauren said, voice cracking. The phone must have still been on. He heard everything. Ethan turned away. Pacing? So what? That's what this is about. We were trying to help him. No, Lauren snapped. We were trying to get the house. Her voice cracked again. This time not from guilt but rage. We were going to pressure him into signing power of attorney. Ethan, we didn't ask. We decided because he's not capable of living here anymore, Ethan shouted. He could have set the damn place on fire. Lauren stared at him. You weren't worried about fire. You were looking up condos downtown before we even called him. Ethan turned on her. And you didn't stop me. You agreed? Don't stand there pretending you were some noble daughter. Her face flushed. I trusted that he'd just go along with it, like he always did. Exactly. Ethan's voice rose. That was the plan. We make the decision, sell the house, move on. Done. Silence fell. For the first time, the truth sat between them, ugly, undeniable. They hadn't been trying to help. They hadn't acted out of love. They had made calculations. The man who built this house, who raised Lauren, who buried his wife alone, had been reduced, in their minds, to a logistical inconvenience with equity. Lauren sank into the armchair, the same one her father used to sit in to read bedtime stories. He was never going to give it to us, she whispered, because he didn't want to. Ethan barked. He left. He changed the locks. He left a damn letter. What kind of father does that? Lauren looked at him, suddenly hollow. The kind who finally figured out what his daughter had become. They didn't speak after that. The house offered nothing now. No warmth. No forgiveness. Just silence. And one truth, as sharp and permanent as the keys that no longer worked. They hadn't lost the house. They had lost the man who made it a home. The soft chime of a motion alert blinked on Frank's phone. Front porch activity detected. He turned his head slowly, placing his teacup down on the small oak table in the corner of his new apartment. The screen lit up with a familiar scene, his old front door, polished brass handle catching the afternoon light. And just beyond it, Lauren and Ethan, they were trying their keys. Frank didn't move. He simply watched. Lauren tried first, then looked confused. Ethan took over, more forceful, impatient. Frank saw the moment realization hit. The locks were changed. He saw Lauren's shoulders tense, Ethan's jaw set. And then, through the wide hallway window, he watched Lauren notice the envelope. She stared at it like it was something foreign, something dangerous. Frank saw her pause. Her eyes widened. Then the camera lost view. He leaned back, sighing quietly, not in relief, not in satisfaction, just the kind of sigh a man lets out when he sees the end of something arrive exactly as he knew it would. He didn't need the audio. He knew exactly how that conversation would go. He could imagine the lines, the blame, the cracks, the excuses dressed up as concern. But even through the glass of a screen, what struck him most was their faces not angry, not broken, just entitled. Not once had they hesitated before trying the door. Not once had Lauren looked around and thought, maybe I shouldn't have done what I did. Maybe he heard more than I meant to say. Frank closed the app and let the phone rest on the table. The room around him was small but warm. The late sun filtered through soft linen curtains, casting gold across the walls. His new space smelled faintly of lavender and old wood. Margaret would have liked it. There was a simplicity to this life. No grand staircase, no long hallways, just enough room for what mattered. He sat in silence for a while, letting the moment settle. He wasn't angry. He'd carried enough of that in his life. He had laid brick and steel across decades, buried a wife with his own hands, and built a home that he thought would protect his family from the world. He never expected he'd have to protect himself from them. But he wasn't bitter, just tired. What hurt wasn't what they had done, it was what they hadn't. They hadn't listened. They hadn't paused. They hadn't remembered. Lauren once looked at him like he could fix anything. A broken toy, a skinned knee, a bad grade. But over time, that look had changed. It became expectation, then impatience, then, slowly, absence. And now she looked at him the way people look at a liability. Frank stood and walked to the window. From 3 stories up, the maple trees looked like fire orange, red, yellow. A breeze stirred their branches. The season was changing. He thought about calling her, just to say goodbye, just to explain that this wasn't revenge, it was self-preservation, that he still loved her. But love without respect was like a roof without beams. Eventually, it collapses. But he didn't pick up the phone. Some lessons can't be spoken. They have to be lived. He watched as the leaves danced in the wind, and he wondered when exactly it had all begun to shift. Maybe when Ethan moved in. Maybe when Margaret passed. Or maybe it had been years coming layer upon layer of quiet neglect disguised as normal life. He didn't hate Lauren, but he did mourn her. He mourned the little girl who once drew him stick-figure family portraits, who once said, "Don't worry, Daddy, I'll always take care of you." He believed her. And maybe that was the problem. Trust is a gift. And he had given it freely. He sat back down, picked up his journal, and opened to a blank page. He didn't write much, just a single sentence. Letting go is not the same as giving up. Sometimes, it's the only way to stay whole. Then he closed the book and made himself another cup of tea. Outside, the wind picked up. And inside, for the first time in a long time, Frank felt peace. It's been 3 weeks since I moved into Sunset Grove. The routine is quiet, predictable. I make tea every morning. I take slow walks by the garden path. I nod politely to the other residents, and sometimes read the newspaper by the big bay window in the lounge. I've never been one for small talk, but lately, silence has felt less lonely and more sacred. The house is gone now. The sale finalized. The new owners moving in next month. I didn't drive by to see them. I didn't want to. That chapter is closed. People ask me if I regret it, if I miss it, and the truth is, I miss Margaret. I miss her voice in the kitchen, her laughter over burnt toast, her soft prayers before bed. But I don't miss the house, because the house was only full when she was in it. Without her, it became an echo chamber. And when Lauren saw it as inheritance instead of memory, I knew it was time to let go. Letting go wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I've spent most of my life building structures, a family, a future. I never imagined I'd spend my final chapter unbuilding, unraveling expectations, releasing attachments, choosing peace over pride, and yet, here I am, still standing, still whole. I thank God for that. It would have been easy to harden, to shut out love, to wall off every remaining soft place inside me. But God, in His quiet mercy, reminded me that even betrayal has a purpose. It teaches us where our boundaries must begin. and who we are without the applause. Sometimes the people we raise don't become who we hoped, and that's not our failure. That's their journey. Lauren is not a villain. She is my daughter. She made choices, and so did I. I don't hate her. I simply released her. I pray for her now, not for her return, but for her awakening, that she'll one day see her reflection clearly and find her way back to compassion. Not for me, for herself. Forgiveness is not a doorway I leave open. It's a window I keep clean. If she knocks, I will hear it, but I will not stand by the door waiting, because life is short and peace is costly. It took me 74 years to understand that love must have boundaries, that kindness must come with discernment, and that sometimes the greatest act of love is leaving. I sit now, writing this with the sun setting beyond the trees. The sky is a wash of gold and rose, softening into indigo. Wind stirs the chimes outside. They sound like Margaret's voice when she hummed. I close my eyes, and I say, quietly, "Thank you, Lord." Not because things went how I wanted, but because I finally stopped pretending they would. God doesn't promise us comfort. He promises us presence. And here, in this small room with its quiet walls and modest view, I feel Him more than I ever did in the big house. I found a different kind of wealth, a slower rhythm, a gentler faith, a deeper stillness. And if you're hearing this, whoever you are, wherever you are, let me offer this. If love begins to hurt more than heal, let go. If your worth is questioned by those closest to you, step back. And if you've built your life around people who see you as useful, not beloved, choose yourself, choose peace, choose God, because dignity is holy and peace is the kindest goodbye. If this story touched, you share it. Not for me, for someone else who may need to hear. You're not alone. Your value doesn't fade with age, and it's never too late to choose yourself.